We could all stand up to welcome the President of Slovenia, Her Excellency. Thank you. Before we begin, while everybody is still moving, please ensure that your mobile phones are on silent or completely off, if I may kindly ask. Thank you. And if you need some seats, there are still some at the back. Can I give you a few seconds just to settle? Or that's where you want to stand? That's fine. Just a few more seconds for everybody to get where they need to get. I don't want any movement while the President is speaking and while we get on with the very urgent debate. Kindly take your seats, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. My name is Ridi Tlhabi. I am a broadcaster and a moderator from Johannesburg, South Africa, living in Washington, and I don't want to talk about that right now. It's a pleasure to moderate a theme that is so crucial in these turbulent times, reimagining multilateral action in age of crisis and constraint. I just want to link this topic to the panel that I moderated about an hour ago. It was on the Middle East, about prospects for peace. I had a plurality of voices, Palestinian voices, academia, multilateral institutions, aid institutions. And it's very difficult to summarize everything that came out of that conversation. But I can say without a shadow of a doubt that the biggest yearning, the most profound yearning, was for all of us to see international human rights law in action, international humanitarian law in action. After all the politics and the different positions and the different solutions were articulated, we all arrived at a central place. A world where international law is subverted, where international law is weakened, where it is ignored, makes us impoverished, makes us poorer as citizens of the world. And whatever our political positions, it was clear from that panel that we can at least agree and coalesce around a single idea, that international human rights law, international humanitarian law matter because they are our greatest bulwark in times of abuse of power and at times of crisis. So it is with that spirit that I'd like to welcome this afternoon the President of Slovenia, who has been such a gracious host to us all at the Bled Strategic Forum for the last 2 days. And we welcome you here, Your Excellency, an address by President Natasha Pirc-Musa.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It was a working day today. It was a working day yesterday, but I am here with the great honor, great pleasure, because the topics that are going to be debated here are very close to my heart. And this is the reason why I'm here, and this is the reason why you are here, I presume. Distinguished moderator, panelists, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great pleasure to honor and welcome you to this special 20th Bled Strategic Forum panel, which focuses on strengthening global cooperation and multilateral responses in today's challenging and constrained world. This panel is also a part of the third Slovenian Humanitarian Forum, the patron of which I am honored to be. I will continue within the broader context of the 30th Slovenian Development Days in mid-October. Ladies and gentlemen, we gather here in a paradox. Humanity has never had more knowledge, more connectivity, or more resources at its disposal. And yet, our humanitarian system, designed to alleviate suffering and uphold human dignity, is reaching a breaking point. Protracted conflicts, climate disasters, forced displacement, pandemics, and economic instability are converging to create an apparently permanent crisis. At the same time, the political will, funding and respect for international law that should underpin humanitarian action are weakening. This is not only a technical challenge, it is also a profound political challenge. Humanitarian assistance, ladies and gentlemen, is not charity. It is not optional. Under international law, it is a legal obligation. Yet every day, in many regions, we see humanitarian access being deliberately obstructed. We see aid being politicized. We see humanitarian workers being targeted and even killed. Civilians are denied the protection they are entitled to. The rules are clear, but violations are met with impunity. If this becomes our new normal, we risk not only a humanitarian collapse, but also the erosion of the very foundations of international law and humanity itself. Slovenia is not prepared to accept this outcome. As a small but principled state, we do not seek to engage in power politics. We advocate defending norms and building alliances around shared values. This is why Slovenia has championed the global initiative to galvanize political commitment to international humanitarian law. In multilateral institutions, we use our voice to remind the world that dignity and legality must never be negotiable. We have convened this forum and organized the panel to address the difficult question of whether the current humanitarian system is fit for purpose. The answer, I believe, is both yes and no. Yes, because the existing humanitarian architecture from the United Nations to the ICRC remains essential. We must protect and strengthen it. But also no, because we cannot simply patch a system that is under unprecedented strain. We must reimagine it. Here, Europe has a role to play. The European Union and its member states provide the largest share of humanitarian funding worldwide. Team Europe is really doing enormously a lot. This is a remarkable achievement. However, the EU must also be the voice of principled humanitarian action, reminding us that solidarity, dignity, and human rights must underpin our responses. Slovenia is proud to contribute to these efforts. We are ready to work closely with the European Commission and all member states to ensure the European Union remains the leading donor and the strongest defender of humanitarian principles. I know these are not easy challenges. However, times of constraint must not lead us down the wrong path. We must resist the temptation to privatize humanitarian assistance and treat it as a commodity subject to market logic or political convenience. Humanitarian aid is a public good. It is rooted in the principles of neutrality, impartiality, and independence. Outsourcing it would cause it to lose its legitimacy. This is why the United Nations system and established humanitarian organizations remain so important. They provide accountability, coordination, and legal framework that private actors can definitely not offer. Within this framework, the private sector can play a vital role through innovation and technology, as well as logistics and financing, of course, to complement and strengthen humanitarian action. However, this can only be achieved in partnership with the multilateral system and with respect for all humanitarian principles that I have mentioned. So what does this reimagined system entail? It means adopting a more anticipatory approach, responding not only after disasters strike, but also in advance. It means being more inclusive and equitable by funding and empowering local responders, who are often the first and most effective actors. It means being more accountable, treating affected communities as partners rather than passive recipients. Finally, it means breaking down silos. Humanitarian aid cannot be separated from climate action, sustainable development, or peace building, nor can it be separated from health. The COVID pandemic has reminded us that health is a humanitarian priority and the foundation of peace and stability. When health systems collapse, societies fracture. Conversely, when health is protected, communities become more resilient and prospects for peace improve. This is why strengthening the link between humanitarian aid and health is so essential. Without health, there can be no human security, and without security, there can be no peace. Today's crisis, as well as those of the past, are interconnected. Our responses must be too. As we approach the 80th anniversary of the United Nations, we should ask ourselves, what does success look like? It cannot be measured in declarations. Rather, success will be measured in saved lives, rebuilt communities, laws upheld, and trust restored on the ground. To me, success will be when breaking the rules of war is no longer tolerated as business as usual. It will be when humanitarian workers can deliver aid without fear. It will be when local actors have the resources and respect they deserve. Success will be when multilateralism is not just an aspiration, but a lived reality. There is no doubt Slovenia cannot achieve this alone. No state in the world can. However, by working together with the institutions represented here today, alongside the courageous humanitarian workers and the affected communities, we can work toward a more resilient, principled, and human-centered humanitarian system. In this time of crisis and constraint, we have two options. We can either lower our ambitions or, ladies and gentlemen, increase our commitment. I stand before you today convinced, of course, that we must do the latter. And normally at the end, I say something, from my heart, which is not written down in my speech. And people normally say that this is the best whenever I speak from my heart. And I would just like to tell you one thing. Being a president is not easy. Being in politics, it's hard. I entered politics as a rookie, as a greenhorn. I was never in politics before. And what it hurts me the most is just to see the 50 shades of gray in politics. Can we not say what's right and what's wrong? I know it sounds black and white, but sometimes in politics we do have to say things in black and white color. And I still do believe, ladies and gentlemen, that there are more good people walking on this planet than bad people. This is why I like being a president. I wish you all the success in your professional lives, and I wish you a good stay in Slovenia. I hope that you feel a bit of a Slovenian soul and heart. Also in Slovenian politics, we have 50 shades of grey. It's not black and white always. But I do believe, I really do believe, that Slovenia is today on the right side of history. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
President, thank you so much. You said something earlier about Slovenia being a small but a principled state. And I don't know about everyone else, but in the few years I've been coming here, interacting with the Bled team, going around the village, meeting people, I know that politics and life is complex and you can't figure out a society just from 1 or 2 or 3 encounters. But there's something soft. There's a softness that just goes to the heart when I'm here at the Bled Strategic Forum.
You know what it is?
Yeah?
A mixture of German and Balkan mentality.
But, President, as we get ready for our next panel, I'm just trying to find the words, my first reaction to your speech. It's that politics is complex. The world is complex. We are facing a plurality of crises. But I wonder whether the willingness to want to do the right thing, that's where we can begin, to want to do the right thing and then journey together towards a solution. So I would like to introduce my esteemed panel in no order of importance, just as I see your name. Please help me welcome the Regional Director for Europe for the World Health Organization, Hans-Henry Klocher. You are sitting. Here's your chair. And also joining you, European Commissioner for Equality, Preparedness and Crisis Management, Haja Lahbib. We are also delighted to welcome Mr. Martin Frick, who's the Director of the World Food Programme Global Office in Berlin. We welcome also the President of the International Committee of the Red Cross, Mariana Spoljaric-Egger. And last but not least, the Director General for Development Cooperation and Humanitarian Aid, Ministry of Foreign and European Affairs, Edwin Skert. I nailed your surname. Thank you very much. So let's start here with Haja Lahbib. I want to talk about international law, that the provision of humanitarian aid and assistance is recognized as a legal obligation. It is quite jarring for us as citizens to see the contestation, the political contestation around humanitarian assistance. It should be the most basic thing in times of tragedy. And I was fascinated, not in a positive way, when I read that there's a global initiative to galvanize political commitment to IHL. And I thought, so we need political commitment. Is that where the problem lies? Is it the politics that is wrong? Let's start there. Problem statement. What is wrong with humanitarian assistance right now in the context of international law?
Well, it's a complex question, but let's say simple. You have to turn on the mic. You know, I'm also, as you, President, I will say, out from the political box. I was a journalist for more than 30 years, I think, and I discovered the 50 degrees of shades, and also that what was obvious is not so obvious, and what is right and what is wrong then become completely confused when you jump into politics, unfortunately. The rules, the conventions we all signed after the Second World War are now putting into question, clearly. IHL in focus, is also putting into place since the previous mandate, so we didn't invent right now, to defend international humanitarian law. And what is at stake, by the way, is our common humanity. I'm sure you know the main subject, the main topics here is Gaza, since I'm arrived. And this is also something that is haunting me and should haunting us all, night and day, because there are blatant violations of human rights. But I'm sure if you put this problem to a kids and you say, this is A and this is B, how can we solve that? They will find a solution immediately. But because of this sensitive issue, the passion, and you know, I was Minister of Foreign Affairs before, and I saw so many ministers, very clever, smart, being completely confused and, you know, obviously not sticking to our core values, European core values, Geneva Convention and everything. We have all the tools we need, but we are not able to implement it, unfortunately. The result is the famine that we see in Gaza, the disaster in Sudan, also the difficulties that ICRC is facing nowadays. I was on mission in many countries where we have to advocate for an impeding access for humanitarian aid, which is, protecting the civilians, women and children that are innocent. We all agree that even when two countries are at war, we need to protect the innocent citizens, but it is not the case anymore. So we want to develop advocacy, of course, IHL in focus. We had also a forum, humanitarian European forum in Brussels. We want to reset also humanitarian aid and so on because of the reducing of the fundings and so on. So, 9 months after the job, I couldn't imagine how difficult it will be to be a commissioner for humanitarian aid. At the beginning, I was so, grateful and so happy because this is also dear to my heart. Because for me, it was neutral. It was being impartial. It was all about solidarity and humanity, values that we all share as a human being. But it's not the case anymore, unfortunately.
Do you think we are reversing on those values?
Clearly, we are
worried
reversing.
about that?
Of course, and we should all be worried about that, because how many generations it will take to recover from what we are witnessing in Gaza, but also in Darfur, in Sudan, in Myanmar.
Let me just pivot a bit and bring in the president of the Red Cross here. So if we are declining and reversing in terms of these values and these frameworks, it's very clear that wars and conflict drive humanitarian crises. The rules of war are being violated consistently over and over again. We are seeing unspeakable suffering, not just in Gaza. You mentioned the Sudan as well. We see the DRC as well. We have a planetary crisis that is displacing people as well. You are right in the belly of the beast. You are right in the heart of it. I'd love to hear from the Red Cross's point of view, what are the biggest problems facing access to humanitarian assistance?
Thank you. Before I start, let me just seize the opportunity to thank Slovenia, to thank the President, to allow me to be here, but also for your speech. It's a speech that I would read over and over again, all the time. I really think you said everything that needed to be said, and I also want to thank the Commissioner, the European Union, for their constant support, because it is very important at this time. We live in a decade of war. I think I can say that because I know the statistics. They're confidential, but we know them. We classify conflicts. Since I took office in late 22, we have classified more conflicts than declassified. Today, we classify approximately 130. This is more than in previous decades, much more than in previous decades. And what we see is an increase in international armed conflict. So international armed conflict means conflicts between states, between organized state armies, defense systems. Countries today, and this I can say safely as well, are at war, preparing for war, or affected by war, including European countries. This comes with massive investments in defense, massive spending in defense, often at the detriment not only and not predominantly international cooperation, but at the expense of human development at national levels and investments in local and national infrastructure that is necessary. It coincides with an unimaginable acceleration in the development of new technologies that amplify the force and the negative impact of wars. The massive displacement we see today in the Horn of Africa is unprecedented if you compare it with previous iterations of conflict in the region. The level of destruction, and I go to Gaza, we have 350 staff in Gaza. The level of destruction in Gaza is unprecedented. You look at Syria, it's massive, but Gaza is exceeding even that. We see people being entirely stripped of their human dignity in all possible ways. So what is most problematic at the moment is not the fact that the law is being broken. The fact that law breaks is being broken is inherent in the concept of law. But what is dangerous today is the hollowing out of the law, the dismissiveness of the law, the dismantling of the normative as the underpinning for political action. This is the most dangerous route we are taking at the moment, and we are on a fast track to self-destruction. If you count the wars, if you look at the impact, and if you look at the impossibility soon to find the means to reconstruct, nurturing further instability, but the permissiveness with which wars are being approached, there is victory at all cost, the annihilation of the enemy, that we don't care, or because we can, the might of military power that gives you the feeling that there's nothing that prevents you from pursuing your military objective. That is the most dangerous, because while we are watching and at the same time looking away from what is happening in Gaza and what is happening in parts of Sudan, we are already preparing for the next escalation that will take place somewhere where we won't be able to stem the tide. And I would seize the opportunity of this panel, I can come back to it later, to discuss how we can bring states together to stem the tide before it's too late. And the global initiative is one key effort in this regard.
Mr. Klöcher, let me bring you in here from the World Health Organization side. We have heard and seen, not just in Gaza, but especially in Gaza, the man-made famine, that's what is being talked about, the blocking of aid, and so on. But in the context of international human rights law and humanitarian law, it is very difficult to approach these themes without reflecting on the fragmentation of the multilateral system. When citizens are vulnerable anywhere in the world, they are looking to the law to come and to protect them. They believe that there are organizations like the World Health Organization, WFP, and many other UN agencies that make up this multilateral edifice. We want to believe that at the time that we need you all the most, you will step up. I'd like to hear from you, what are your biggest constraints? But in answering that as well, a question that I'm just thinking of now, can multilateralism survive the moment that you will define in your answer to my first question?
Thank you, Reddy, and thank you, Madam President, and everyone for the invitation here. It's a great honor for me. So, the big issue, the big elephant in the room, speaking as a medical doctor and as a regional director of the WHO, obviously, in this multilateralism cadre, is that the sanctity of the healthcare workers is no longer there. Whether I was working for MSF, Doctors Without Borders, or WHO, right, from Ukraine to Central Asia to the Sahel, It's not anymore going from one crisis to the other. We have to navigate permanent disruption in a climate where the healthcare workers and the patients are directly targeted. For this year only, there are 1,100 patients and doctors, nurses killed, already much more than last year. I think it was the UN Special Rapporteur on Health to Right who, when she was reporting to the Human Rights Council in June, who was telling the conflict zones became no human rights zones. So if you are scaring people to go to the hospital and the doctors where they have to be saved, their life being killed, then we have obviously a huge issue. On the multilateralism, so yes, I mean, I think many of you are acquainted with the UN 80 initiative by the UN Secretary General to make the UN fit for purpose, which Dr. Tedros is mirroring, because in WHO too we're undergoing existential crisis with the US leaving the WHO and other states having to beef up more for defense. So we have to do our own homework, but I would say that we have to think of a way also how to bring the soft power and the hard power more together. Because what I see is that the bargaining space for humanitarian dialogue is really decreasing. So, and there is sometimes a kind of a preset initial dominant narrative that says you are the victim and need the help and you are the perpetrators. And so I will give some example, because I always try to be a little bit optimist. In Haiti, by talking to the gangs in terrible violence, WHO did succeed to massively vaccinate children for cholera. In Gaza, under very life-threatening circumstances, 550,000 children in 2 rounds for polio. In northwest Syria, actually together with ICRC, with support of the EU, across contact lines of the ISIS. So I think we have to think really, not to be seen as the naive humanitarian actor based on principles, which is the starting point. We should stand very strong. And I was very touched by you, Madam President, telling that without health, there is no peace, no security. Absolutely. This is the basis. But at the same time, how do we open up that space to have a humanitarian corridor, right? To allow at least this, what you say already, to answer to the expectations of the people. But definitely this has become very, very complicated.
From the WFP side, same question around the problem statement. What are the biggest challenges? But again, in answering that, there's a concern around food being weaponized, the weaponization of food in times of crisis in Gaza, in the Sudan, and so on. It's worrisome that certain practices are reinforced. At the first moment when food was being used as a weapon, it was jarring, it's a shock to the system. But now you hear it every day, and there's a way in which the mind is just normalizing that. And the fear is that if that translates into our political position, that, oh, this is what happens during times of war, we've normalized it. Your thoughts?
Well, thank you very much. I think the President said it very eloquently. It's our very humanity that is at stake. And the acceptance and the respect for humanitarian principles is the inner core of it. Now, food is a very emotional topic, and normally, under normal circumstances, no matter what, you don't wish starvation to your worst enemy, because it's a horrifying thing to starve to death. And we've been seeing, and I just said that in a previous conversation, over the last 20 years really, how the respect for human rights and for international humanitarian law slowly started to get little cracks, and now the unspeakable becomes speakable. And we see, as the colleague from WHO said, not only one specific situation in which it has become extremely difficult for humanitarians to operate, but it has become almost a new normal. When we speak about Gaza, we tend to forget that this is also the deadliest conflict for humanitarian helpers that we have seen since the Second World War. 370 plus alone from the United Nations, over 500 people who work in the humanitarian killed in this conflict. And it's not getting better. And I think where we are is a multiple crunch. It's the lack of respect for humanitarian workers. It's a tendency to more and more interfere with the delivery of aid. But this also compounded by a funding situation that is just very, very difficult, even if it wouldn't be for all of these restrictions. If I compare what we had by Christmas 2019, we had about 135 million people who needed food assistance. Today, these are 340 million people, while at the same time, the World Food Programme has 40% less funding than last year. So it has become difficult. And what I see as so devilish in that is if you, by default, don't have enough food, if you don't have enough funding, then what should be apolitical, the humanitarian help, almost automatically becomes political because you can distribute the food only once. And now we are in a situation where, in the big humanitarian crisis, we are facing staggering access problems, but also in the more silent crisis, we just can't distribute anymore because the funding is not there. And that creates, again, in the countries, a feeling of double standards, which is eroding the trust in the humanitarian system. So I think there is a very serious situation here that needs to be addressed, because in the end it is really about a rules-based and multilateral system that has only the credibility if it's able to address those who are most in need.
We're going to talk about funding in just a moment. That's our second theme. But I do then want to bring you in Mr. Edwin Skirt, Director General for Development Cooperation and Humanitarian Aid, Ministry of Foreign and European Affairs. A landscape analysis from Slovenia's point of view when it comes to humanitarian assistance. What is wrong with the system?
Thank you. An easy question for the beginning. But let me first start by thanking all our partner organizations to participate at this third Slovenian Humanitarian Forum and also at the Bled Strategic Forum. The entire humanitarian system, not only that one of the UN, was largely built on the rebels of after the Second World War. It was quickly adopted then in the 1990s. Geneva Conventions were adopted in the meantime. And now we are, let's say, 35 years later than in 1990s. When we talk about the humanitarian crisis, particularly in Slovenia, we often think about the situation in Gaza, about the situation in Ukraine. But there are so many protracted crises around the globe. And what is different that it was in the 1990s and after the Second World War is that there are many non-state actors, that there are conflicts within the countries, that there are actors that think that Geneva Conventions and international humanitarian law does not apply. And then we have a huge problem in general that there is not enough funding. Of course, you know, when people from the UN or from the ICRC speak to me, they would usually say it is important that you're principled because you're a small state. And we know we can't talk about scale in Slovenia. But I think that they are not doing the right thing when they talk to us and they say that financing is not important. It is. If every single member of the international community would allocate the necessary funds for humanitarian assistance and development cooperation, there would be millions of people more fed. We have 300 million people that need humanitarian assistance. Maybe we could assist 100 million. So funding is important. And when we speak about funding, we have to take into consideration the changed world. And these changed worlds have different powers or different composition of power than in the 1990s when the humanitarian system was adopted for the last time. So there are other actors that can contribute financially, that they can be loud when we talk about the respect of international humanitarian law. And the system should adopt to kind of embrace these new actors as supporters of IHL, of humanitarian principles, and as providers of humanitarian assistance, of humanitarian funds.
All right, so you've gone to the heart of the matter, underfunding. But I'm sitting here thinking, okay, there could be chronic underfunding because there's simply no resources, there's a competition for scarce resources, humanitarian needs are just growing exponentially. Or there could be underfunding because states that are legally bound to finance humanitarian action are deliberately falling short. So that's the second thing I'm saying on this topic. The third thing I'm saying is that there could be underfunding because there is a weaponization again of funding, paying for some crises while ignoring others. Your thoughts on the implications of this era of chronic underfunding, and I want to comment from all of you on this one because it is central to your operations. Let's start with you.
I will start by saying that the European Union will stay a reliable and predictable and principled partner. We are becoming, thanks to the US, the first global actor with 6 billion euros per year, which represent 40% of the humanitarian aid in total. It's a huge responsibility considering the budget, the money, but also politically. And it's important to find also new ways to work more efficiently. That's why we hold this European Humanitarian Forum a few months ago in Brussels, where we gather more than 5,000 NGOs to find ways, and we know the ways. Never waste a good crisis, we said. And we know that by implementing what we call the nexus, the so-called nexus, peace, cooperation, development, we can save money. By also working on localization, putting the humanitarian aid closer to those who need it, we can spare money. We are going also to increase the localization from 11% to 22% by next year. So it's doubling our localization. It's allow us also to bring, more responsibility, to shift the power in a less, I will say, allow me to say, colonialism manner or paternalist manner. It's not us, I was very astonished to discover, for instance, in Adre, near the Sudanese border with Chad, that the flowers that I was discovering there and distributed was coming from France, from USA, from Western countries. But, to bring all this humanitarian and all this food has a cost. So we need to be more local. And I discovered a fabulous project by the WFP in the Rohingya camp in Bangladesh, where you brought the hosting communities, you allow them to sell vegetables through the World Food Program to refugees, the Rohingya refugees. So it's a circular economy. And hopefully, after a couple of years, there will be more independence, more autonomies. And this is also a more dignified manner to help them. So we need to work in a more efficient manner. We need to spare money. And also, we need to stay principled. Okay. This is very important.
So I'm just thinking about what was in the President's speech about humanitarian assistance not being a charity, and it sounds as if you're talking about a systems transformation and empowering local communities as well. I must get an answer from the Red Cross around the non-compliance with the financial obligations. But do we need to then rethink compliance then, not only voluntary pledges, but through enforceable obligations and penalties for non-compliance with IHL and human rights law when it comes to funding as well?
I have to refer to my 3 years at the ICSC again. During this time, since the early 2023, we have cut close to 5,000 positions. We'll have soon in the coming weeks. We reduced the budget by 1/3, by almost 1 billion, due to the constraints. But I still don't want to be distracted by funding with regards to what we need to do to stem the tide. The world is printing money as if there were no tomorrow. We are looking at the global debt crisis. We are looking at levels of destruction that are, disregarding all the guardrails that were put in place after the Second World War to prevent that massive level of loss, human loss, material loss, from happening again. But we are allowing it to potentially happen again. We have to continue supporting the humanitarian assistance because it's an impartial, neutral way of providing assistance that is not commercialized but also not serving military objectives and reinforcing the negative impact of war. But what we have to do, first and foremost, is to prevent the tide from submerging the whole world with something that we will not be able to reverse if we don't do it now. When I spoke at the Security Council a year ago under the Slovenian presidency on leadership for peace, I said something that I've been repeating since. Denouncing your enemy for breaking the law in public may be useful for your political constituency and your political objectives, but for us humanitarians, it doesn't make a difference. What makes a difference is if states who have an influence call their allies and tell them to stop, if they use their political, military, and financial economic powers to bring their allies to a better respect for the rules of war. That's preventing the humanitarian fallout from happening in the first place. We have to acknowledge that international humanitarian law is as effective as the political will that states are prepared to put behind it. And only compliance with the rules of war will reduce the humanitarian pressures and the humanitarian costs, because we are far beyond what any state can absorb anymore, including the United States, even if they came back at the levels where they were before. And the European Union cannot compensate for it, no matter how hard you try. And you are very generous already, but your taxpayers cannot be overexploited either. So we have to stem the tide. This international initiative, the Global IHL Initiative, is built on a joint statement by 6 states: France, Brazil, China, Kazakhstan, Jordan, South Africa. These 6 states came together with the ICSC last September to call on all states to join a political movement to reaffirm their commitment to a more protective interpretation of the rules of war, to an adjustment of military strategies, to an implementation of these rules at national levels to be prepared for war, to contain the negative fallouts that we see at the moment, because we know that we would not see the end of a near-peer confrontation in the Asia-Pacific or any part of the world if it were to happen. 25 states took the lead over organizing consultations on the interpretations of the rules of war and formulating recommendations. Slovenia is one of the 25 countries. 130 countries have participated in consultations so far. First findings will be published in October in view of an international meeting next year. These first findings show already that the majority of states want a more protective, less permissive interpretation of the rules of war. But that means states will have to budget for implementation of IHL. They have to train their forces, they have to review their military strategies, they can work with us in preparing the military exercises. It's very concrete. We need the defense ministers on board for this. It's about protecting civilian infrastructure. It's about new tech in war. It's about naval warfare. It's about protecting health systems. These work streams exist, the platforms exist, but it's also about making the link between the rules of war, respect for the rules of war, and promoting peace. We have to galvanize political commitment, and states have to make the Geneva Conventions and their implementation at home, in peacetime, a political priority, and they have to budget for it. This is the only way we can, in the long term, mitigate the humanitarian pressures, including on us as humanitarian workers.
Right. From a WHO point of view, I mean, I'm sitting here just feeling sorry for WFP, WHO, Red Cross, because you're not political players. You're non-political. You've got to keep humanitarian assistance neutral. You've got to be there where you are needed the most, and yet you have to navigate a deeply politicized multilateral system. I know my theme was around spending and budgets. They're still relevant to where I'm going, but I'm thinking you've got to reset, right? One of the themes of this conversation is humanitarian reset. I wonder for the WHO, what does it mean with this reality in front of us? What innovations are you thinking of in monitoring and verifying that could strengthen compliance with protection of medical missions in this kind of constrained space? What latitude are you identifying for yourselves as you have to complete your mission despite the politics?
So I would say that, of course, everyone knows WHO is not military, we're not a court, we are technical and moral. So we have to execute that role with courage and precision. So silence is not neutrality. The first thing is, I would say, that we bear witness with evidence. We're the only ones who have a surveillance system for attacks on healthcare. And in many settings, be it in Ukraine, in Gaza, in the Syrian Arab Republic, this is the only independent source, really, of these attacks, is number one. Number two is to speak truth to power, what Dr. Tedros and me have been doing consistently, be it Gaza, Israel, Ukraine, Russia, and that's why I would like to come back to the paramount importance of humanitarian dialogue with all sides, but in a smart way. The third one, of course, and we're doing a lot there with ICRC and MSF, is to try to protect, of course, our workforce, but also, like we're doing in Ukraine, the health facilities, be it masking locations or underground or pre-deployment. So this is key. And then, of course, we're not a court, but we're collaborating with evidence with those institutions who have this mandate, be it the International Criminal Court or whatever. Now, on the financing, I think for WHO and UN, this is a healthy exercise, the soul-searching after 80 years. And I have a special initiative at the start of my 5-year mandate on addressing violence against girls and women, which is a terrible thing, and thank you, Commissioner, for really your support. If you look what UNFPA is doing, what UN Women is doing, what WHO is doing, I mean, there is definitely a lot, if we're brutally honest, a lot of possibility to really go back to the core mandate and stop mandate creep. But for me, it's not about financing WHO. It's about financing the international aid. We have philanthropic organizations, right? Some who are working in countries with a bigger economy than the country itself. I'm living in one, by the way, in Denmark. Of course, they have to be governed by the state, right? The control, but there's a lot of possibility. Banks, a lot of money. But my goodness, I mean, the people to reprogram, to fill in the forms, it takes easily 6 months in a crisis, so they need to have more risk appetite. The third one, of course, is domestic financing as well, which is there. So I think that maybe even more than a lack of funding is that after the COVID and with the wars, countries have less appetite to finance aid, but they're putting national interest above global solidarity, which means security, stability, and defense. So that, I think we have to be, maybe the final point what you told, Madam President, I can only agree is, and to the Commissioner, on local empowerment. I have been 5 years in Myanmar between 2004 and 2009 under the military junta, and we had Cyclone Nargis. Saturday morning, 4 hours, 120,000 people died, all those my own daughters as well. It took months before the international humanitarian aid could really go to the river sites, and the same for post-earthquake Turkey. So it's expensive humanitarian aid which actually reaches a small portion of the people. In Myanmar, it were the ladies in red, we call them, the midwives, living there with the red robes. So it's happening. In Bangladesh, the monsoons, the people are educated on early warning. So to empower them is a good thing for everything, including economies of scale.
WFP, same, you started the conversation around funding. I'd like you to expand on that. But most importantly, enforcing the rules so that there is compliance at every level.
Well, the second one is an easy one because WFP is entirely voluntarily financed, which is we are depending on the gratitude of countries. We cannot force countries to contribute. We can only note the generosity, and this is a very good moment to say thank you to Slovenia, because the contribution from Slovenia, despite being a small country, went up in an exemplary way. And I'm using the example of Slovenia if I talk to other governments, no naming here, as a shining example. But I think we heard several of the aspects that are really, really interesting. About innovation, about making the most of the money, and the Commissioner mentioned the example. When we talk about food aid, people still believe that, you know, this is the classic box with food that you are handing over to a family that is starving. This is the case, and sometimes you cannot do otherwise. But more and more, we can deliver cash, and with digital technology, we can really, with pinpoint accuracy, find the single mother with 4 kids. We can find the elderly people who don't make their way to a distribution center. And cash has the wonderful ability to be recycled again and again and again. And I have seen that in refugee camps when you don't give food to a family, but you give a little bit of cash. You see 2 wonderful things happening. One is local businesses start to flourish, and we are trying to support that, but also trying to support farming ladies to start a production, to have an income. And what you also see, and I find that so heartwarming, and it's countering any populism that you hear all too often, is how responsible the families really are with the money. And then there's a little bit of saving, and maybe you buy a book for school, and you do all of that. It sounds simple. It was not possible 20 years ago with the digital tools. You can do that. Yeah. And the second example, very rapidly, the President mentioned it. We have 60% of our food situations triggered by war and conflict, absolutely, and we spoke about that. But there is also a cost crisis, and there is the ever-increasing impact of climate change. And here, anticipatory action, basically using modern forecast systems, using the fact that even the poorest people have digital devices to tell them, A, there's a situation coming, and B, distributing a little bit of cash so people can take their family and can take often their animals when they are farming and put those in security already helps reducing the impact of a disaster tremendously and helps us spending less money and more targeted with the effect that we want to achieve, which is protecting the local population.
All right. I do want to allow 1 or 2 questions from the floor, but let me just very quickly from Slovenia. We've heard just now that you are a donor government in the EU despite your size, and I think we need to stop talking about your size because the magnitude of your reach is huge. And I'm just thinking maybe there's an unfairness that if you are a small nation and you are increasing your contribution and everybody else is getting away with it, or it's a positive soft power tool that can be used to put pressure on major powers to comply, something that we in our country call name and shame. I know this is a diplomacy conference. You don't want to shame anybody, but you want to call a spade a spade. Is there a way that we can use your leadership, as it were, in this field to just galvanize more action by major powers?
I agree that our power lies in our principled approach in the UN, in the Security Council, in all multilateral settings. It's not the funding, but when I mentioned the funding, after Martin spoke about it, I mentioned it because it is also important. It is important that you demonstrate that you can walk the talk. But of course, what we could do is just look at us. Look at Slovenia in the Security Council when we talk about humanitarian access, about respect of IHL, all the principles about the support to the Geneva Conventions, about all the initiatives and the stakes out. So this is important. That's why also our leaders, they always speak about the principled foreign policy. And when we talk about rules, about international law, we talk about principles. So we are pragmatic when we come that we have to choose which UN agencies we are going to finance, where to prioritize our official development assistance to make it more efficient, how as a small donor we could bring us to more localization, because without localization this will only be a lip service. And if we don't empower the communities, we won't achieve that much as we would, only with the existing humanitarian infrastructure. But empowering local communities, so doing localization properly, it doesn't mean subcontracting them. I think we will have to bring their voices to the table, their decision makers. The case that Hans mentioned earlier would not happen if there would be enough funds, if local communities would be equipped for anticipatory action, so that when they would see the drought coming, that they would be ready to prepare for that drought that is coming. So this is why localization is so important. We try to do it with our limited funds through our excellent NGOs that we have in Slovenia that are tasked to empower local NGOs in our partner countries. And of course, we try to focus as much as possible to work with a limited number of international organizations. And of course, we always lend our voice when we talk about the principle of humanitarian principles and of IHL and in general international law.
Okay, I'm going to be like a headmistress. I'm going to be so strict. No speeches. No speeches. Your question, very brief, very succinct, or a comment. You may just want to react to something that you've heard. When you see me standing up, it means you must wind down. When you see me standing here, you are in big trouble. Let's go.
Can I stand? Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Guled Ibrahim. I'm actually from Somalia, Security Council of the UN. So I had a quick question. You mentioned localization, and I think there was a theme going among the panelists. How can development and humanitarian can be tied together? Because I feel like if you're going to localize to improve the lives of people, maybe seeing humanitarian through the lens of development, because instead of seeing through the lens of charity. And I think my question is, how can we improve the nexus between humanitarian and development? Thank you.
I'm proud of you. Great, short. Who's going to answer that one? Anybody can go there. The EU, Commissioner?
We have a very good example in Afghanistan and many other countries where we've been able to implement very successfully the nexus, because it is clear that humanitarian aid is just an answer, response in emergencies. But to recover in a more, to help the countries to recover and to, in a sustainable manner, we need cooperation and development. We need education, we need circular economy, and so on. So it starts with cash, it starts with localization, with employment, with a lot of things that we put all together to allow civil society to walk on their own feet.
Okay, second question. Who has a question or a comment? Quick. No? There, at the back. Okay. Sorry. Remember, short and sharp. No pressure.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much. Stefan Cibian from the Făgăraș Research Institute in Romania and a Global Diplomacy Lab member. I know the discussion mainly focused on soft power in a sense, but I think the consequences that we are seeing today come from hard power working differently. So when states withdraw from organizations and withdraw their budgets and take over territories of other countries, this is already quite significant for the current multilateral system, which probably indicates that this system is not going to be around for long. So, sorry for being a bit long, but the question is, if this multilateral system collapses, which it seems to do, what are we doing? Thank you.
Do you want to answer that? Because I know we spoke about it off the panel about, yeah.
It can't collapse. We shouldn't give up. It's the responsibility of each and every state. Don't forget, the majority of states are small to medium-sized. The majority of states are middle income. The majority of people are not rich and mighty. The law, the multilateral system, the organizations like the UN and the ICRC were created to protect the weaker, not the stronger. But they are the majority. We have a huge responsibility. The more we talk about the multilateral system collapsing, the more we talk about IHL collapsing, the more we accelerate the process. Let's talk about how we prevent that. And I count on all states to be at the table next year and to declare their political commitment and to say exactly what they are going to do to stop that trend and to reverse it. We have no other chance.
Can I just be hard on you on that one for just a moment? That sometimes the belief that the multilateral system is collapsing and international human rights law doesn't matter or it's applied unevenly and unequally. It stems from inconsistency in political leadership. You articulated clearly how you see an equitable world, a fair world. So not you personally, but the EU, that you are firm and vociferous in calling for compliance with international human rights law on Ukraine, for example, being quite emphatic in denouncing Russia's aggression. But when it comes to Gaza and Israel, Israel can just run roughshod over everyone else. And I'm South African, so you know where I stand on this, just to put it out there. The inconsistency.
Yeah, but, you know, I was previously Minister of Foreign Affairs from Belgium. I was supportive of the action undertaken by your government and by supporting the ICJ. And so this is a way to support the multilateralism. Now, when it comes to the European Union, you know that for being able to take any action, when it comes to the external action, we need to reach the QMV majority, which means 15 member states representing 65% of the population. And for that, we need the big countries on board. Germany, Italy, France, of course, and so on. So in the numbers, now we are quite moving with more and more member states being more vocal when it comes to taking measure and sanctions. Because the problem is not humanitarian aid. We all agree that we want to see humanitarian aid reaching population, reaching the Palestinians, unimpeded access, and so on and so on. It's okay. But then, when it's not respected, what can we do? What leverage do we have? We have leverage, but for activate this. So that's why I said this: we are not facing a humanitarian crisis of the system. It's a political crisis.
The crisis of morality.
Of morality and a lack of political will.
Very quickly, closing argument. I'm going all over the show. The clock is ticking. Let's start here.
I take an example with the President. I speak from my heart. I think when we are speaking about humanitarian aid, we often look from the perspective of what does that do to the beneficiaries. It also does something to us, and I think as Europeans, and maybe I might speak as a European, it also defines who we are and how we want to be and what we want to stand for. And in all this populist debate, we must not forget that this is a core issue of humanity.
Mr. Klöcher, your closing comment.
Thank you. If we allow hospitals to be a target, whatever the humanitarian system is financed, it will not work.
Okay. From the Red Cross, closing thoughts.
I join hands with the President. You know, our chances of survival are best in peace. So at the core, the human is good, and this is something we need to work for. Thank you.
Closing comments from you.
Let the P5 countries recommit to IHL politically. Let the rest stand united into IHL. That's politically, and practically it would be great if mothers in Gaza and Ukraine would be able to feed their children without being afraid there will be no food tomorrow.
And my closing argument, you've been a phenomenal audience. Thank you so very much. Thank you. Thank you. We did great with time. Let's give ourselves a round of applause as well. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. It's so great.
Good afternoon. We are right on time and we intend to stick to time. Consider this a sort of culmination of ongoing discussions throughout this forum. We say congratulations as well for the 20th anniversary, in which the question of leadership for peace has been a central point of departure. Now we turn our attention really to what sustaining peace in a shifting global order entails, and necessarily leadership. To that end, we are delighted to welcome Excellencies, colleagues and friends to this panel. First, allow me also to extend my appreciation for your hospitality and that of Slovenia as a whole to State Secretary Dr. Melita Gabric. Thank you so much for being here with us. His Excellency Mohammed bin Abdulaziz Al Khulafi, Minister of State, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the State of Qatar. Always a pleasure and honor to see you, Doctor. Thank you so much, Chancellor Cho Hyung-chan of the Korea National Diplomatic Academy, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. An honor to be with you. My dear sister, leader in our field, Dr. Comfort Aero, President and Chief Executive Officer of the International Crisis Group. Always good to be with you. Madam Director General, Krong Ganyit. I did it. Rakcharahun. Even the last. I say, my name is Itonde Kekoma. Come on. The Director General, Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Thailand, Department of European Affairs. Really an honor, Madam Director General. And a colleague, a sister institution, the Berghoff Foundation of Germany, Dr. Maria Levenchenko, project manager there. Really, thank you. So, here we are. My name is Itonde Kekoma, President and CEO of Interpeace, based in Geneva. We're a proud partner of the Bled Strategic Forum and strategic partner with Slovenia, and honored to be in conversation with leaders advancing and sustaining the peace agenda. Let's move to discussion. Comfort is with me. Slovenia is somehow in an enviable position at the moment. I don't know if enviable is the right term, but strategic position at the moment, in which you're seeing the world in the advancement of peace, both from the lens of the Security Council, but also looking forward as the co-chair and co-facilitator of the Peace-Building Architecture Review process. And in both capacities, you have demonstrated, and I should mention together with Egypt, on the Peace-Building Architecture Review process. In both processes and positions, you have demonstrated the very leadership you've been describing. Can you, Madam State Secretary, share with us, from your perspective, what is the role of, and I don't like this term, so help us think of a better one, small states, in upholding of multilateral diplomacy and international leadership on peace?
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for your kind words of introduction, also of my country. Enviable is one word, strategic is a better one. You know, the thing is that perhaps a better word also is smaller states than a small state. But the thing is, maybe the first comment I will make is that the majority of the UN member states are actually smaller states.
That's it.
And, you know, for everybody, for us who are smaller states, multilateralism is in our vital interest. As they say, the adage goes, for smaller states, multilateralism is a protection. For big powers, it's a source of legitimacy. So to go to the question of what we can do in the Security Council, So the challenges that we have nothing to do with our size. The challenges have to do with this deep polarization within the Council, and this internal dynamics actually reflects very faithfully the tensions that exist in the wider geostrategic context. So this is a challenge, and perhaps as a smaller country, since you started from this vantage point, we have a certain advantage perhaps in trying to be a bridge builder, in trying to take processes forward. Now, I would like to say in no uncertain terms here that, of course, we have the UN Charter, and we should all adhere to the UN Charter that promulgates some very basic, very fundamental, perhaps better, principles in international relations. That is prohibition of force, prohibition of the use of force in international relations. It's, territorial integrity, sovereignty. We have a large body of human rights law, of international law, of humanitarian law. And we see what's going on in Ukraine, a blatant violation of all these principles. We see what's going on in Gaza, destruction, suffering, humanitarian catastrophe in both cases, really. Famine, even famine in Gaza, where we have hundreds and hundreds of lorries, trucks waiting to enter Gaza, and they cannot get in. But this is all to say that what we are doing in the Security Council, but also in other multilateral fora, is we are putting forward, we are a vocal voice for humanitarian protection, for the respect of humanitarian law. And, we speak about double standards a lot, right? And I would like to say, again, in no uncertain terms, we do not have double standards. We have sanctions against Russia, who is the aggressor against Ukraine, because we believe that those who violate international law, who commit atrocities, should be taken into account. And we have introduced our own sanctions against the Israeli government, right? There are no double standards there. And one thing that I would say as relates to double standards is we must not confuse double standards with a special responsibility that we have as members of, let's say, a region. We have let's say, stronger or a bigger responsibility to work to resolve regional conflicts. And here, that's why we are so active and so vocal in trying to find a solution in Ukraine. We support Ukraine through material means, through political means. We also actually are very present through development, cooperation to humanitarian aid. We are very much on the ground in Ukraine through our demining action, humanitarian demining. I see the director of our institution, ITF, here with us, Mr. Lovrencic. And and we are doing the same also in the West Bank and in Gaza. We are even present in Gaza with our in our mine action activities on the ground. So I think that these are all actions that we are doing, but also we are very vocal. And as I said, well, this is, I just wanted to also illustrate a little bit, that double standards, no, we do not subscribe to that. So I mentioned the mining, and I would like to use this opportunity and thank our donators or, our partners in the mining humanitarian demining, and it's Republic of Korea and Qatar. We have colleagues on the stage, and we're working very closely together also on these files. Am I out of my time? Or can I say
not
one more?
Not out of time, but I think you provided the perfect segue to refer to colleagues. Please do.
That's very good. But if I may just conclude
yes,
my opening remarks. I'll be very brief, but make no mistake how these two crises, and we have many more crises because data shows that we have the highest number of armed conflicts in the world since the Second World War, how they end will have long-term consequences, not only for the people or the peoples that are directly impacted, but also for the regional stability, regional security in the Middle East, in Europe, and wider. And it will have serious and long-term consequences for our global order and for our humanity. Thank you.
Thank you for this. And Madam State Secretary, because you have pointed to such a crucial fact that we are living with and that generations will continue to live with, that is to say, the manner in which wars are being carried out has consequences also on the quality of peace being sought. And the quality of peace has implications or ramifications for, let's say, the durability of any agreement therein. Thank you. Turning to close partners, as you've described, Minister of State, Dr. Al-Khelaifi, Qatar has built a trusted reputation as a global mediator in some of the most pressing, challenging conflicts facing our world. You've referred to some of them. The situation in Gaza, in Sudan, in the Great Lakes, particularly in Eastern DRC, in Ukraine, notwithstanding elsewhere, to the extent, and you'll forgive me for referencing this, I see your team looking at me. The Guardian has recently called Doha, I quote, the global capital of diplomacy in light of those efforts. There's a smile, huh? I got In your view, Doctor, what factors make mediation effective in today's fragmented geopolitical environment, as you so well put? And what lessons can the international community draw from Qatar's experience and your own as a principal mediator?
Thank you very much, dear brother, for this important question. And at the outset, please allow me also to extend my thanks to the host. The government of Slovenia has been very generous with us in organizing this very important platform, which we believe that it's a very important platform for all of us to continue sharing, collaborating, but also discuss the current challenges that is facing today's world agenda. Your question is very important. I might need a full lecture to explain the tactics, some of the lessons learned that we have managed to gain by time. More than 25 years of experience in the field of mediation. The state of Qatar has emerged in that area as an important cornerstone in our foreign policy. We've been very much engaged in the most significant and complicated cases around the globe. From Gaza, and this long-term conflicts between the Palestinians and the Israelis, and our involvement in the recent event that started in October 7 is not a new approach. We have more than 15 years of experience in mediating between Israelis and Palestinians, and unfortunately, and I say that unfortunately, our efforts every time does not exceed ceasefire. And you know, my friend, and I know that ceasefire is not an end of conflict. It does not end the conflict, but it puts the conflicts to sleep. For how long? This is a question that I think many of the mediators are facing related to the sustainability element. How to have an effective mediation can be summarized with some of the few good ideas. One, neutrality and trust. And mediators needs to be neutral in approaching the conflicts, which is very challenging for many countries around the globe. Neutrality means preventing any political agenda, any even hidden political agenda from the parties, but acting in a good faith in trying to sustain and improve the relationship that the both parties are seeking, or the help that the both parties are seeking through the mediator. Qatar managed to demonstrate that to different disputing parties by time. Second, which is very important, is keeping the line of communication open. We're following what I call by the open door policy. We speak to all, not only state actors, but also non-state actors. I know that some of the countries around the globe, including major powers, are somehow hesitant to engage with some of the disputing parties, whether they are groups, non-state actors, sometimes even individuals, which makes it difficult to find and secure peace within that specific dimension. And therefore, Qatar believes that keeping an open communication policy or strategy helps a lot in creating that pathway and being always in the front line in many of those conflicts that are approaching the world. We have managed to expand our reach out from being very much known of our mediation in the Middle East to go even beyond that. You gave some of those examples in Africa. We're busy these days talking to the disputing parties. From one line, the Rwanda DRC, but from second line is the M23 group with the DRC government. And we've been honored by this trust by the DRC governments to take this negotiation to the next level and trying to create a breakthrough in many of those conflicts. Latin America, we have a historical approach in the Venezuela case, in their relationship with the United States, especially during the previous administration. And now we're continuing our approach to different countries around the globe. I have to be honest with you, one successful story creates more demand by a lot of countries around the globe. So you could imagine that we have a lot of requests by several friends around the globe in trying to approach many of those difficult and complicated cases. And many of them has a historical and deeply rooted problems that cannot be resolved in a day or a night. And that will lead me to the third important lesson learned in having an effective mediation: patience. You need to be patient in dealing with the disputing parties. The resolution and resolving conflict doesn't come over a day or a night. It takes time until you build trust between the disputing parties. Having the mediation as a quick train ride will not always lead to a sustainable outcome. And therefore, patience in terms of building trust step by step is something that we have learned is very critical in many of the cases that we're dealing with currently at the state of Qatar. And last but not least, one mediator cannot do it alone. An effective mediator means an effective partnership with the different stakeholders. And here, our partners, especially for us in the state of Qatar, is not limited to the state actors. We have many of our friends around the globe from the governmental sides are helping and assisting us in many of the cases. Of course, the example of Gaza, we're partnering with our brothers in Egypt and our friends in the United States have been helping us since the beginning of that conflict. But we have several other cases where there's always an open opportunity for countries to join forces together in creating that peace, building that important pathway towards peace. And also non-state actors, NGOs. Comfort is here, representing also her institution, has been very much helpful in her engagement with us at the state of Qatar, as much as many other NGOs, institutions that have been very effective in helping the mediators in finding this shared and important goal. And therefore, I think those important points are only an example of how a mediation can be effective. Of course, there are other lesson learned that we have managed to gain by time while working in those difficult and complicated cases that we have approached. And I have to be honest with you, we are human beings at the end. And we get directly impacted by the dispute itself, even during the mediation. And our emotions are fluctuating. Days we become very optimistic, other days become a bit pessimistic. But what is unique, I think, about our government and our leaders is that we never give up. And we don't have an impossible mission in the field of mediation. All of the missions are possible. It just demands persistence, it demands patience, and it demands tolerance by the disputing parties to the negotiation table.
Thank you. Masterful in the description of both the lessons as well as the challenges the human face, not only of conflict, but of those advancing peace therein. Thank you for this. And you remind us, something you said, Madam State Secretary, that we are at a height of armed conflicts globally. Your partners, ICRC, speak of 120, the highest number in their history of categorizing, which means there will be more, not less, demand for the good offices that you describe. And we thank you together with partner states in this regard. If I may, Mr. Vice Minister, Chancellor of the Korean National Diplomatic Academy, South Korea is navigating a new foreign policy approach, as we've understood, with an emphasis on a kind of pragmatic multilateralism, balancing alliances with historic partners throughout the region, globally and specifically in ASEAN and the EU. Can you share with us, from your vantage point and leadership, how you exercise this question of leadership for peace in an increasingly multipolar order? The floor is yours.
Well, I first would like to extend my sincere gratitude to the organizer for giving me this valuable chance to be here with such a wonderful group of panelists. Well, thank you very much for the wonderful question as well. South Korea today finds itself navigating a world of turbulence and uncertainty, just like many other countries in the world. Under these circumstances, the new South Korean government is pursuing a pragmatic diplomacy to respond more flexibly to the rapidly changing international environment, while fostering diverse forms of cooperation that can benefit, mutual benefit. That can advance mutual benefits. If I may, let me share my views on peace efforts of Korea in three dimensions: Korean Peninsula, Northeast Asian region, and international arena. So, first of all, on the Korean Peninsula, the new South Korean government is very much determined to move beyond an era of confrontation and usher in a new chapter of peace and prosperity. Inter-Korean relations based on reconciliation and cooperation will benefit not only the Korean Peninsula, but also the international community as a whole. Therefore, the Korea is making every effort to advance peace and security on the Korean Peninsula by taking measures to reduce tensions and bring trust and confidence. It is also exploring possibilities for the resumption of both inter-Korean and U.S.-North Korea talks. Our goal is ultimate denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula, not by war, but by negotiation. We know it's a tall order, but we can't afford to give it up. Korea is also very much committed to ensuring that the Korean Peninsula will not become a flashpoint that unleashes another global conflict. Second, on regional dimension, with the U.S. the alliance relationship, which was forged right after the end of the Korean War in 1953, remains the foundation of South Korea's security, but it's also evolving, as was demonstrated in the summits in Washington between President Lee and President Donald Trump just last week. Cooperation is further expanding into economy and advanced technologies such as AI, semiconductors, and nuclear energy. I believe such a robust alliance relationship with the United States, together with the future-oriented relationship with Japan, as well as the trilateral cooperation among the three countries will contribute to the peace and security in the region. With China, our approach is measured and pragmatic. Korea recognizes China is indispensable for regional stability and a vital economic partner. Our policy is not about confrontation, but about managing differences and building a more stable and matured relationship. Korea is hosting the APEC Summit, Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit, this coming October. And President Xi Jinping of China is expected to come to join the meeting, which could provide a good venue for bilateral summit, in which, enhancement of relationships and peace and security in the region will be further discussed. At the same time, Korea is pursuing more diversified diplomacy. For example, relations with the ASEAN and the European Union are also being elevated, not just in trade and investments, but also areas like green transition, digital cooperation, maritime security, and defense. Last but not least, the international level of responsibilities. As a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council, just like Slovenia, we are stepping up to global responsibilities. Korea is actively engaging in conflict prevention, peacekeeping, peace building, as a long-standing contributor of troops and funding to the UN peacekeeping operations, and as a member of the UN Peacebuilding Commission. It is also contributing to transnational issues such as climate change, cybersecurity, and humanitarian crisis. In particular, with the assumption of the presidency of UN Security Council for this month, Korea will host an open debates on AI and international peace and security. So to sum up, South Korea is positioning itself as a responsible power in deeply unstable world by playing a role in bringing more sustainable peace and security on the Korean Peninsula, in Northeast Asian region, and in the international community. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So clear, and I'm very pleased you brought up again the role of the Peacebuilding Commission. Comfort, I know it's something you follow quite a bit. I hope we can come back to that also in the co-chairing role on the review of the peacebuilding architecture, as well as Korea's own contribution therein. If you allow me to turn to my right, and I'll come back. Thank you. Madam Director General, we've heard about the instability and complexity as described, with those challenging and increasingly more challenging regional dynamics in the immediate neighborhood of Thailand. And more broadly, how does Thailand view its role in strengthening international peace and security?
First of all, thank you for having me in this panel. Actually, it should be my vice minister, but with the political situation in Thailand, so I'm here as a representative from Thailand. So Thailand is we are deeply concerned with the ongoing situation in the world, especially like trade tension and the tariff measures, and also we are closely monitoring the what's happening in Ukraine also, and also in the Middle East especially. So for Thailand, we sincerely hope that major powers will make responsible choices, avoid drastic escalation, and leave room for cooperation amidst this strategic competition. And I am also very proud to say for Thailand that during the colonization era, that's happening during the 15th, the 20th century. Thailand is the only country in Southeast Asia that has not been colonized. So with building on our strength, Thailand right now, during this turbulent situation in the world, geopolitics, we are pursuing three key policy priorities. So first, amidst this shifting global power dynamics, Thailand will focus on maintaining our strategic equilibrium with the major powers, while intensifying our role as a bridge builder, as Slovenia is very strong in this, and also the facilitator to foster trust, mutual interest, and constructive engagement among countries and groups with diverse positions. So that is why we are now the partner of the BRICS, as well as we are robustly pursuing our accession to OECD. And second, in order to foster peace, stability, and development, Thailand believes that rules-based multilateralism and international law must anchor any evolving global order. We are a middle-sized country, so we know that we need our friends in the United Nations. At the same time, we recognize the urgent need to reform the multilateral system to better reflect today's realities. So Thailand therefore strongly supports efforts to make the system more resilient, inclusive, and effective in responding to an increasingly unpredictable world that we are living in. And we remain steadfast in upholding international law, particularly the principles enshrined in the United Nations Charter. I think this is like a wall for us, especially with the country of our size. In addition, the Indo-Pacific region has rapidly emerged as the new center of the global geopolitical and economic gravity, and with ASEAN at its heart. ASEAN stands for the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, comprising of 10 countries, with the 11th country coming up, that's Timor-Leste. So as a founding member of ASEAN, Thailand remains steadfast in upholding ASEAN's unity, centrality, and relevance. So even we are now having some bilateral issues with our neighboring countries, for Thailand, we intend to solve this issue through peaceful means and in line with international law and United Nations Charter and also ASEAN Charter. We do not want to escalate this tension with our neighbor countries. So, and the third thing is that Thailand will step up our policy of advancing proactive economic diplomacy in response to a more fragmented global economic order and shifting supply chains. The Thai government's priorities include reviving the economy, enhancing competitiveness, and improving the ease of doing business. And now we can see that we're moving forward with more FTAs, which we think as an open country, it's very important for us. And this is very, right now we need diversification in trade as well. So now, I'm very happy that the FTA with the European Union is going very positively, and we intend to conclude this FTA as soon as possible, preferably by the end of this year, but maybe as soon as possible. So I think this is also a big step. So that's our key policies, and we hope that our role will help to bring peace and security to the world that we're living in right now.
Thank you very much for this and the strong emphasis on the resolution of disputes through peaceful means. We've heard this repetitively on matters very close and central to the maintenance of international peace and security, and specifically to your own. So we appreciate this deeply. My dear sister, Dr. Errol Comfort, you're a trusted counsel to many. And not a day goes by where I don't see the analysis, the wisdom appearing, be it on Bloomberg or Financial Times. And that's for a reason. You lead a reputable institution that emphasizes quality of analysis and independence in doing so. We hear a lot about the historic numbers of armed conflicts. Mm-hmm. But oftentimes we only hear of a couple, repetitively, which means the vast majority are, quote unquote, neglected. You'll help me with better terminology. Mm. What is your counsel in terms of the role of leadership in peace in addressing the majority of those 120 armed conflicts, not just the 2 or 3 that are on the headlines?
Yeah. Thank you for your kind words, Itonde, and it's a real pleasure to be here the first time, and to our host, Slovenia, for their partnership with Crisis Group as well, and Minister Hulefi for your kind words for Crisis Group as well. Before I answer your question, Itonde, I was having an epiphany, maybe not an epiphany, but it was in reference to what the Secretary of State said about small states as well. Mm. It's 80 years since the founding of the United Nations. 80 years ago, the world has been shaped by about 5 or so countries. The more I go to a number of summits, conferences like this, the more and more the podium is shaped by what you call small states, or what some people call middle powers, or what people call rising powers as well. So there is an interest in decentralization of who shapes peace, who determines the outcome of peace, and therefore, Itonde, who are the new leaders in determining the future of peace and security as well. So I think it's an important acknowledgement that increasingly the rooms, look at this room itself, it's not made up of the 5 big powers as we normally would define them on the Security Council as well. The Guardian was not just being kind to Minister Hulefi by calling Doha the global centre for diplomacy. It was a recognition of where the centre of gravity lays in terms of trying to rethink diplomacy and recognising that there are other regions, other powers who are not just relevant in their region, but also have a global role in trying to shape peace as well. So, for me, that's quite a significant difference. That doesn't mean that the other usual 5 suspects are not relevant. It means, however, that there are other leaders coming into it. Itonde, your question goes to the heart of why Crisis Group was born 30 years ago. And we were born in the midst of another great European war in Bosnia, in Sarajevo as well. And in a sense, Crisis Group, and I will be honest and frank with all of you, Crisis Group is having its own sort of Sarajevo to Kyiv moment and Gaza moment. We were born at a time when we said never again to Srebrenica. And then we said never again to apartheid, because it was a year before that we saw it was in 1990 we saw the beginning of the unraveling of the apartheid. And we said never again in the form of Rwanda. And then again we said never again in Darfur. And then we came forward and we said never again, never again, never again. And now we are saying never again in Gaza. I heard very well what your president said yesterday. That how will we account for ourselves, in the years to come to explain the Gazas as well. But I also want to ask us, where will we be, or how will we explain ourselves to generations, not just for Gaza and Ukraine, but now let me list to you, Myanmar. Where is the leadership in Myanmar? Where's the leadership in Haiti? Minister, I acknowledge the difficulties, and you're going to be entering into that situation. Crisis Group covers 70 live conflicts. That's just from our own data. You mentioned 120 from ICRC as well. And the reason why Crisis Group was born is to keep an eye not on the headline news, the Gazas, the Ukraine, and I would actually even include Sudan in that category as well. I don't think Sudan lacks attention. I think it has been deprioritized. I don't think Sudan suffers from international attention. I think it has a number of competing interests that are making it hard to find a resolution to the situation in Sudan. This was a country that 20 years ago, there was a massive campaign called Save Darfur as well. And 20 years on, we are here again asking ourselves the same questions and going round and round in circles, trying to figure out something that quite frankly, if we have to spend our time mediating the mediators, then you really have a problem. If I have to spend my time trying to figure out how I'm going to work out the interest of all those countries that are interested in a country's crisis, then we have a problem. There are 18 million people in Sudan today that are starving. Forget the numbers in Gaza, 18 million people. We have a famine also, or near-type famine. 1 million people displaced in their country, and a region that, quite frankly, is going to be sucked further and further into the crisis in Sudan. It is a humanitarian catastrophe on our watch as well. So there is not a lack of leadership, but we also have to manage the various competing interests of all the people who are leaders in trying to understand, what do you want from the Sahel? What do you want from Sudan? What do you want from Myanmar? What would satisfy you in trying to find an end to the crisis in these wars as well? That is the question. Because if we took your interests out of the game, we may be able to figure out a pathway to a peace in these crises. Let me give you one example, Utunde, and I'll keep quiet. I came into the work of conflict resolution and all that through Sierra Leone and Liberia back in the 2000s as well. There were a number of countries who were interested in Sierra Leone and Liberia. In the end, it came very clear to us that we needed to figure out a sort of a contact group where we spent time working out the various concerns of all the constituent actors to the conflict. And none of these were Liberians. These were not Liberians. These were not Sierra Leoneans. These were regional powerhouses, including West Africa, including North Africa, including Europe, including the United States as well. So if we're asking us to go back to the drawing table, let's think about how we create some kind of a contact group where we can iron out in a serious way the various interests of key actors who are working or who are trying to find a pathway to peace in a number of the conflicts. It is not a surprise, Qatar, that you are being drawn in to a number of these places because people look upon you as maybe being able to provide a platform to help think through incrementally, because I heard what you said about the patience. And when you form something like a group of friends, or whatever you want to call it, you start building, you start ironing out the irritations, you start ironing out the frustrations, you start listening to each other's interests, and you begin to work out what is it that is key to unlocking the interest and that would enable each of the rebel factions to stop foreign shopping, each of the leaders to stop foreign shopping, and to find a pathway to peace as well. This, I think, is what is missing in a number of the conflicts that we're watching today as well. Thank you.
Thank you for this. And let me add, please. Trusted counsel, as I said. Let me add, in doing so, you demystify the processes and enable various actors with interest, as you rightly described, to feel as though they are contributing.
And you deal with what Minister Khulaifi said. Do not underestimate the suspicion and the trust. I mean, these are the two things that continue to undermine a number of peace processes, the lack of trust and the suspicion that is built in by the various actors.
Thank you. Dr. Levinchenko, Berkhoff Foundation, Maria, you've advanced, accompanied peace-building initiatives, as I understand, in Ukraine and Ethiopia. Help us, from your vantage point, to better understand what does effective leadership for peace look like when, quote, traditional interventions, some of which you've just described by comparison, are falling short of expectations.
Thank you so much for the question, and it's an honor and pleasure to be here today on the stage, and especially since I was a young Bled Strategic Forum leader a couple of years ago, I feel a specific connection to the forum and this platform. I think when we talk about leadership for peace, we need to start with the question, what does peace look like today? We have lots of scholars and researchers who keep talking about the notions of the positive and the negative peace. However, what we see happening in our communities is something completely different. For example, our colleagues in Ethiopia call this new concept a cold peace. Cold peace means existence of peace only on the paper, but not in the lives of ordinary people or their communities. It's just the preparation for the new cycle of violence. So it's not reconciliation, it's not cooperation, and it's not rebuilding of this trust. Therefore, when we talk about leadership for peace, we need to have the courage to actually ask ourselves how peace should look like. For decades, we have looked at peace in this linear transition, from a war to the ceasefire, from a ceasefire to political agreement, and then from political agreement to reconciliation. However, in realities, in the communities that we work with, and the ones that have been mentioned today already, Ethiopia, Sudan, Afghanistan, Ukraine, peace is fragile, peace is fragmented, and peace is easily reversible. Therefore, leaders for peace cannot focus just on measuring their successes in a number of peace agreements signed or peace talks that they held. They need to focus on rebuilding relationship, trust, and trying to help to heal the wounds which otherwise might lead to a recurrence of the violence. But it's also really important for us to understand, that was mentioned today already, that we do live in a new era in the new world. Yes, we still have influential G7 countries who are leaders in peace mediation and negotiation, the same as multilateral institutions such as European Union and UN. However, we see the emergence of the new actors. Yes, I realize that Qatar might be already working for 15 years in this field. However, the cases of supporting peace talks on Afghanistan or national dialogue in Chad has been quite prominent. Or Turkey, who has been instrumental in supporting grain deal between Russia and Ukraine with the onset of the full-scale invasion. Saudi Arabia also extends its influence way outside of its borders. But what does that mean? That actually means that communities are too tired to wait. They want peace now. For many of them, political institutions are too slow. Quite often in our conversations on the ground, they refer to them as doctors who are just treating the symptoms of the disease instead of looking into the root causes of the conflict. That's why for the new leaders of peace, it's really important to start working together, build alliances, invite new unconventional actors to the table, and actually try to come up with the strategies in how to live in this new fragmented world. And finally, what is the most important, we as peace dealers, as those who try to work on supporting peace in all those communities, need to have humility when we look at the peace question, but also recognize our own biases. yes, in our field, in mediation, dialogue facilitation, we talk a lot about neutrality, impartiality, or impartiality as well. However, it's not really true, because we are still impacted on a subconscious level by our institutions that we represent, or passports that we hold. That's why we have to move from top-bottom approach, recognize the stereotypes that we have, but also support localization, ownership of the local actors. And we have seen that successfully happen in Ukraine, when municipalities and women groups have been supporting community-based protection during the full-scale invasion. Or in Ethiopia, where religious leaders are taking dialogue facilitators' roles and supporting dialogues in their own communities. Because we cannot sustain peace if the solutions are coming from the outside. We cannot sustain peace if we are talking about neutrality in the world where neutrality itself as a contest is contested. We can only sustain peace if we allow those who live in the conflict every single day to have power in decision making. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. And please. Clear demonstration, as I heard many here affirming what you were describing. Openly and quietly, but it's a demonstration of the investment in the young Bled Strategic Forum leaders. Thank you, Maria, for this deeply. Keeping with the non-linear, as you described, we're going to open up a little bit more. And you allow me, Doctor, my dear brother, you heard this reference to not just addressing the symptoms, but going deeper. The trust that Qatar enjoys in the advancement of peace mediation. Can you shed light for us, in light of the lessons already reflected upon, on sustainability of agreements beyond the initial commitments, if you will? How do we go about ensuring this?
Well, thank you so much. This is definitely one of the most challenging tasks for any mediator. It's not to bring the parties to sign the agreement or have a handshake and a picture, but goes beyond that to sustain that agreement in a longer period of time. It's something that is very critical, and history has shown us how some of the agreements were not as sustainable as we hoped that it would be. Bringing violence back again between the conflicting parties. War kicks off in many of the region around the globe. Due to the difficulties to sustain that peace and agreement. I have 5 points to share with you today related to sustainability, and I've mentioned that before. Some of them may work, others may not, but we need to continue fighting for sustainable peace and a sustainable agreement between the parties. One of which I thought that it will be very important are the regional actors. To any conflict, the regional actors or stakeholders are the closest to the disputing parties and closer to the disputing area. And therefore, relying on regional actors to work closely with the parties of the agreement, following up the signing of the agreement itself, is something that is extremely critical. And here we don't refer only to governments and states, but we also refer to regional organizations. African Union, when it comes to the DRC, Rwanda conflicts, are very critical, and they need to continue playing a closer role in that conflict, following up the signing of the Washington Agreements and the Doha Declaration. When it comes to the Gaza situation, we have Jordan and Egypt, our neighboring countries, that have very close interest. Some of them may touch base on a security interest, others, other types of interest. And therefore, I think it's very important to value and continue to cooperate with regional actors to the areas of conflicts. A second suggestion or a recommendation when it comes to the sustainability element is definitely some of the work that's need to be done before reaching that agreement. One of the challenges that I've noticed in my time at the ministry and working in many of the mediation cases is that the clauses or the provisions of the agreements need to be as clear as possible to the parties. Misinterpretation and reading some of the clauses in a way that is interpreted in one way for one party but interpreted in other ways for other parties creates a huge complication at the implementation level. And therefore, I know that some of the lawyers are with us in the audience, get the lawyers to strengthen and make those provisions as clear as possible. A second suggestion is to have a longer relationship with the parties. What I would recommend is what we call by the follow-up mechanism in many of the agreements. Chad is a good example that you have raised. This is one of the things that we have also introduced in the peace agreements between the 43 different political and army groups of Chad signed in Doha, is by creating a follow-up mechanism that will allow the mediator to have a longer relationship with the disputing parties rather than a shorter period of time. So I will not erase your number from my phone following up the signing ceremony. I'm very much interested in taking up this relationship to the next level and continue monitoring the implementation of the agreement. The third point is the dispute resolution mechanism. It's a very critical and very important, and many disputing parties are not taking this very seriously. The disputing parties has the liberty of selecting any future dispute resolution mechanism that can be selected. Many countries refer to negotiation as statistically the most selected method or tool in resolving conflicts. Mediation, continuing the relationship with the mediator even post the conflicts. If a new conflict has been raised, the mediator can engage back again with a specific mechanism determined between the disputing parties, or even judicial tools, such as arbitration, or referring those cases to the ICJ and the international platforms. These are very critical, I would call it tips, that any disputing parties need to take into consideration during the implementation phase. Of course, what the mediator can do is encourage, is recommend, present as positive initiatives to the disputing parties. But my role will not extend beyond those important aspects. It is the parties' duty to implement in a good faith the agreements that they came to the mediator to try to find the resolutions towards it. And therefore, I think it's very critical that the parties are taking this very seriously and really think of the impact of returning back again to violence. And again, history has always shown us how if the conflict has been returned, it will not be returned in the same shape or form that has been as it used to be before. Gaza is a good example.
Exactly.
And I think it's very essential for us to make sure that the parties understand their obligations and be committed towards those process. One last point, and I think it's very important, and I think our colleagues from Korea and from Thailand has touched base on, is the economical developments, and I will add to it the social and humanitarian development projects that are very critical. Many of the conflicts around the globe, the most impacted are the most vulnerable, are the poor people in the streets, are the citizens of those areas of conflicts. And therefore, continuing this engagement by presenting several projects, even at the international level, that can help and support those areas is something that is, I find, very important and can at least bring hope back again to the people on the grounds to witness that the agreement is not only for signature and the agreement is not only for a picture, but it's also for a direct impact on the ground.
Thank you. So clear. And let me come back, if I may, to this emphasis you put on avoiding ambiguity. You know, the 2005 Comprehensive Peace Agreement between the government of Sudan and that of the Sudan People's Liberation Army movement could have been described in totality, and it was, as particular provisions, let me be fair, in the form of constructive ambiguity, deliberately by the mediator, as a means of literally postponing more complex issues, many of which we see taking shape now, exactly as you described, when the war reemerges, and there are several since then in other forms, more catastrophic, varied interests. And in that agreement in particular, the constructive ambiguity around, for example, what was the purpose and intent? A new unified, transformed Sudan. And yet we know the interpretation moved somewhere else, focusing on a particular provision, or on the popular consultations, with no legal terminology behind what this meant for the people of Blue Nile or elsewhere, but again, to delay and postpone in ambiguous terms, deliberately, And there are the precise spaces in which that have seen neglect also amount to forms of conflict. Really, thank you for this emphasis, also in light of your official role and capacity. Madam State Secretary, December will be will hold again the presidency of the Security Council. December now, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
What is the aspiration you envision to push forward? We've heard from your president, as Comfort described earlier, but what do you see as the vision for that final mandate, and how does your legacy on the Council, how will that shape your future diplomatic priorities, if you would, please?
Thank you very much for this question. Indeed, December will be our last month on the Security Council, and we'll have the presidency the second time around. The first time around, our presidency was last September, and our flagship event during that presidency was open debate under the title Leadership for Peace. It was chaired by our Prime Minister, and what transpired from that open debate was that all 15 member states of the Security Council, meaning the P5 and the E10, recommitted to the principles of the UN Charter. Now, this may seem a little bit abstract, but this is fundamentally important, and we want to continue building on this pledge, as we could say, it was a kind of a pledge. But that's one side of our thinking. For sure, we will work on that, and we will continue also working on our priorities. I was talking about protection of civilians. I was talking, and of course, I focused on two conflicts when I was giving my opening remarks. But of course, we are well aware that there are so many conflicts around the world that need our attention, and that's why we need to emphasize and strengthen the basis, meaning what our vantage point, and our vantage point is humanitarian law, it's international law. But our priorities were also to widen the scope of the themes, the topics that the Security Council has its agenda. And in particular, we are focused on climate, peace, security, climate, water, peace, security. I mean, and this is something where we see that in the coming years, this nexus will become even more important, and we have to deal with this. There are this nexus is so important. Water, the climate change, is at the roots of conflicts, and of course, this with the climate change, we cannot escape this, and this is going to be certainly something that we are going to be focusing on even after our membership on the Security Council is over. But one thing I want to emphasize in relation to our membership on the Security Council. This is not an outlier for us. We've been on the Security Council before. We ran 3 times. We're successful 2 times. But we have been very proactive all along in multilateral fora, and our next step, I hope, or our big priority is Human Rights Council. We are seeking to be on the Human Rights Council now the 3rd time around, starting in January 26th. And certainly we will also take forward some of the priorities that we've been working so energetically upon. And one more thing the last thing, I know we are short in time. I want to say that through our engagement in the Security Council, we built many partnerships, including partnerships with the countries from the Global South, global partners, and we are going to continue to focus on continuing to build these partnerships. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam State Secretary. Building off of this, we have 10 minutes, 45 seconds remaining. 43. Someone's been listening very deeply to our conversation. The former State Secretary of Finland, who is now leading Center of Excellence also on civilian crisis management, established in Berlin. Johanna Suomavori, a dear colleague and friend, dare I say, who will reflect a little bit on what she's been hearing. But before doing so, one question, if I may. We spoke about this briefly last night. And so inspired by your own research and reflections, allow me to say, all this emphasis on crisis management, on ceasefires, as you referenced, how do we get to also transformation? Can we use this term right now? Conflict transformation? The patience you described? Please, if you would, sir. Chancellor.
Well, thank you very much for the question. But if I may, because the time is limited, we have talked a lot about the traditional security challenges. But as you know, out there are so many non-traditional challenges we face. For example, the challenges such as global supply chain restructuring and technological competition. When energy and food supply chains are disrupted, as we all will expect, the conflicts and insecurity can spread rapidly all around the world. Likewise, competition in advanced technologies such as AI carries both risks and possibilities. It also creates new domain of rivalry, but also demands international cooperation on rules, norms, and regulations. Because it also has the potential to deepen distrust among nations, we need to engage with those new challenges before they translate into crisis. So, to address these challenges, it is more crucial for all of us to expand communication and cooperation. So, for its part, Korea is trying to seeking solutions on these new challenges, but at the same time, the BSF and platforms such as BSF and REAIM summit could also provide valuable opportunities for like-minded countries to share perspectives on, build consensus on issues that could profoundly affect our future generation. Thank you very much.
I'm so glad you said this. Our future generation, not just agreements for the political moment, but frameworks like the Charter that take into account verbatim that future generations may not suffer from the scourge of war. Madam Director General, is it possible in this moment of great instability to move beyond crisis management alone? We have to do it, but also put forward transformative aims, if you would, briefly.
Well, yes. For Thailand, we think that balancing the powers in the region is a very important factor for creating peace in the region, and which is resulting in, for the future generation to live in a better world. So for Thailand, for the major powers in the region, it's definitely China and the U.S. And we have, for Thailand, we enjoy the close ties, and both countries are very important to our people-to-people connections as well. So for Thailand, we foster our friendship and partnership with both sides. So to ensure, but while we ensure that our core interests also remain intact. So that's quite a difficult, and I think it's a question for every country in the world right now, how we could keep our interests to remain intact. So, and also what the cornerstone of Thailand's foreign policy is ASEAN. So, and we believe that we see that the positive and constructive relationship between China and the U.S., particularly with respective relationships with ASEAN, it's very important, especially for the economic trajectory of Thailand and ASEAN, and also the region as well. And and the last, but not least, is the multilateralism, and we stand for multilateralism. Even some people do not now have trust in multilateralism, but for Thailand, we think that it can still play an important role in fostering cooperation and also addressing the trust deficit right now. But although a major reform is needed, so I think that could be from Thailand.
Thank you for this comfort. Is it possible for us to speak of transformation in the midst of this world we're in?
Depends on what you mean by transformation.
Conflict transformation.
Yeah. I mean, conflicts go through different cycles.
That's it.
As well. And you may get small scale transformation in a corner of a conflict, that manages one part of the piece while you try to figure out the rest of it. Your point on the CPA, the comprehensive peace agreement as well. But there is an interesting development going on right now that can enable transformation if we allow it to work, which was what Slovenia and Egypt are doing. So let's go back to your opening
peace-building architectural review process.
And let's close the loop as well, because if you allow the idea of the peace-building fund commission is that it's the one that steps in to help in terms of transforming a society from going back to conflict, to start thinking more about the medium to long-term developmental instruments and strategies that you need to help sort of lower the temperature and start deal with those socio-economic issues. So I don't expect radical reforms in terms of the architecture, but it can be the body where you start thinking in a more concrete terms, how you put in place the building blocks that will help a society not return to conflict. Because I think when you look at a number of the conflicts that we're dealing with now, these aren't necessarily new conflicts. These are sort of a recycling. These are, conflicts that can spiral in. When you think you've signed a peace deal, you find out actually you've only signed it in pencil, but nothing is really sticking. So you have instruments like the peace building that begin to think about the incentives, the peace dividends, but that is not necessarily for some of the other conflicts that we're talking about, like Ukraine, on Gaza. I think we're a long way from that kind of conversation. What I'm thinking about is places like Haiti, Sierra Leone, Liberia, Venezuela, Colombia. Asking why those are stuck is crucial. And I think the Peace-Building Commission and the architecture that you're working on, State Secretary, becomes vital if it's allowed to function, and if we are serious about international financial reform, then we can start thinking about those societal issues that are crucial to keeping the glue together.
If it is allowed to function.
And I really do underline that word, if it's allowed to function as well.
Maria, on transformation, the possibility, you work for a peace-building organization. Is this naive speak, or does it mean something in the state of the world we are in?
It absolutely means a lot. I would start saying that trying to bring peace to the communities is like rebuilding a bridge after the war. We can have a grand opening ceremony, lay a couple of planks here and there, but if you don't work on restoring the foundation, that bridge will fall down, unfortunately. So peace agreements, they are like hardware of the peace, while we have to work on the software in parallel. And by software, I mean something that we use in our field by 4H. It's heads, hearts, hands, and the health. So basically, we need to allow communities to be present in decision-making, as I mentioned before. We need to have empathy towards them, to what they go through. We need to be able to provide them with job opportunities, and that's the hands. And final, not the least, we need to help them with the mental health support. So if you build that bridge, only then they will be able to work together hand in hand if they have that support from international community.
Johanna, your key observation, we don't have time for all of them, but your key observation in light of what you've heard. Loud and clear, please.
It was a very interesting discussion, and I have a lot of key takeaways, but I only take 3 main ones really quickly. And I think overall, I think the panel, all of you had a very comprehensive security approach. So you didn't focus on military means only, but you were really widely describing different means to solve conflicts or have an impact on them. Like State Secretary from Slovenia mentioned many means how you are supporting Ukraine, for example, starting from humanitarian assistance. And I think building that trust or the bridge, it needs comprehensive security analysis and means. And I was wondering whether we have a lot of means already, whether we use them all as effectively as we could. One observation was, I think, from Ministry of State from Qatar, that we have to use more efficiently also cooperation with the regional organizations. And I'm working as a director for the European Centre of Excellence for Civilian Crisis Management. And we are actually working together with the EU member states to develop their national civilian crisis management capabilities so that they can effectively deliver different kinds of services, from police to border guard assistance to security sector reform, rule of law assistance, gender equality advice, or climate and security, hybrid cyber, or disinformation mitigation advice. And we need this palette. We don't get comprehensive security or sustainable security only with military means. In addition to that, we need civilian crisis management. And we in Berlin are working on that, and I think all of you really gave me hope also by having this wide approach to security. I don't want to take more of your time, but thank you really much for this, and good luck for your work.
Thank you so much, so clear. As we say, give a vote of thanks. I'm so sorry, we're going to have to conclude. It's the last panel of the day. I see your hand up. I would encourage you to come forward and engage the distinguished panel. Join me in thanking our distinguished panel. And as we, please, if you would, join me in thanking. Allow me to give the floor to Madam State Secretary, perhaps to also extend the invitation to next year's Bled Strategic Forum, if you would, Madam State Secretary.
Yes, well, first of all, thank you so much for moderating this panel so well, and thank you for your partnership. And we are now, and thank you all for coming to the 20th edition of the Bled Strategic Forum. I think that you could all see for yourself that coming to Bled is worthwhile. It's worth everybody's time to come here and be part of this, what has become through years really one of the foremost platforms for exchange of opinions, one of the foremost strategic fora in the world. So it is my pleasure to announce already the dates for next year's Bled Strategic Forum, 31st of August and 1st of September 2026. I'm looking forward to seeing you next year back here in the beautiful Bled.
Thank you so much.